The AI world today, it's a once-in-a-generation opportunity. It's amazing for us in terms of how we think about what's behind us in terms of the tailwinds for growth. Do you have the capabilities to do X, Y, Z? Can we go consider a different architecture for you that would be better for a certain solution? So yeah, it's more custom in nature, and the know-how that we have across all these different technologies is unique for enterprise. We went from a holding company to a traditional corporate environment. We used to be 80% memory. We're now less than 30. Our gross margins were 19% when I joined. It's now north of 30. In our past Q3, we reached debt zero, which is mean we have equal cash to equal debt. There's a second wave called inferencing, which has not even really started. I mean, yes, there's a lot of technology being developed, but it hasn't even started.
Penguin Solutions topping earnings estimates for the third quarter. The company also lifting its full-year earnings outlook amid AI infrastructure momentum. To discuss this and more, let's get to Penguin Solutions CEO and President Mark Adams.
It's not about the money. I could have made more money somewhere else, but more about having the ability to really have a hands-on creation of something new for this company and the employees, having connection to a community, having a purpose in life, being around intimacy and love, whether you're making $10 an hour or $10 million an hour, those are things that are just fundamental to a purposeful life.
So why don't you describe what here is? Hey, Mark, thanks a bunch for joining us here on Micro Journeys. Great seeing you, man.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, it's the first time over at your headquarters. This is a beautiful place. It's now my understanding is that you guys here in the U.S. have two other locations, correct?
Technically three. We have Penguin Integration Lab down in Fremont, and then we have our memory subsystems manufacturing in Newark, which is adjacent to Fremont. And then we have a manufacturing facility in Arizona. And then, of course, we acquired Stratus and Cree over the last 5 years. One of their headquarters is in Boston, actually the old digital equipment headquarters up in Maynard. And then Cree's out of Raleigh, North Carolina.
The reference to Boston, I have to talk to you about this. This is a pretty cool story. I guess you got exposure to a different set of environments than most people in the technical fields. You played collegiate sports for a number of years, correct?
That's right. I went to Boston College, and BC wasn't quite at the top tier of college football programs, and that was a good fit for me, not being at the top tier of college football programs. I was kind of a tweener between 1AA and 1A. And when I got there, though, I was a quarterback, and there was a quarterback who they had on the depth chart, Doug Flutie, but no one knew how good this kid was. And he was 5'9", 165 pounds in wet clothes. He was amazing. He obviously won the Heisman Trophy. And so in today's world, I would have probably transferred out to somewhere where I could play. That wasn't the way it was back then. You kind of went there, and I was a backup, had a great time at the school, had a great time. BC went to 4 bowl games in 4 years. They were ranked, at my sophomore year, I think we were ranked number 4 in the country. We beat Alabama. We beat Penn State. Just to beat Clemson after they won the national championships one year, we beat them at home. So it was a great run, a great time to be at a school that was kind of new to be on the public stage. And then, it was amazing how much of an effect Flutie had beyond just football. I mean, the athletic program and also just admissions all over really outside the U.S. too, but really all over the country. More people came in. That was really my downfall was Tom Coughlin was the head coach of the Giants, and he beat Belichick twice in 2 Super Bowls. So he's a Hall of Fame football coach. He was the offensive coordinator, quarterback coach. So he was my quarterback coach at the time. And when Flutie graduated, which was my junior year, I had 1 year left. And they're like, hey, we love you. You're a great kid. You're part of the program. If someone gets hurt, we'll pull you back into the fold. But we got five high school Americans who want to be the next Doug Flutie. We got to build into the program. So I kind of got it. So, I had a great time. Didn't play a whole lot, but it was a really super fun experience.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, to think about juggling, academics while you're doing, the top tier football program. At the time, you're going to bowl games. Like you said, you have Heisman Trophy winners that are in your, same team. I mean, what a wild dynamic.
That was one of the early lessons I got in life was that I noticed when I had a lot going on, I was kind of at my peak in terms of performance. There's this expression, I forget how it totally goes, but it's kind of idle hands, idle mind. if you're not doing much and you're just hanging out, kind of life's not much. There's not a lot of substance to it. And so, yeah, I was certainly involved in the campus, involved in football and the academic piece. I even worked because I didn't get a full ride. I got a partial scholarship. And so I just noticed that when you're involved and you're engaged in life, you have purpose, there's substance and meaning. And I just remembered I actually was more productive when I had all that stuff going on. And then in the spring, less so. And then you kind of go out and do things and kind of it's a little bit less driven, less intentional.
Yeah, there's a saying that I've heard, winning is a habit and so is losing. Same thing with, idle time, right? When you're continuing to be productive, it becomes a habit and you want to fill in each of those 15-minute blocks that you have in your day. And if you're not doing that, it becomes almost, kind of a nervous internal piece, right? It's something that you're saying, okay, well, hey, I should be doing something now. Why am I not? It's it sounds like that helped to set a lot of the foundation for kind of different segments of your career. One of the ones that I got to get exposure to when we originally met was some of the background you had over at Micron. I think that would be interesting to know a little bit more of how you kind of integrated in there, and then ultimately, kind of bubbled to one of the most top positions there.
Yeah. I, at the time, pre-Micron, I was in the consumer products world with a company even down the street from the headquarters called Creative Labs. And Creative was famous for producing audio out of a computer way back when with the technology called Sound Blaster. And they owned 80% of the market. And I joined them and kind of I was running the Americas for them as a general manager. And then I was recruited for my first operating role as COO.
So this was in sales, though, when you started out.
Yeah, I was in sales and then sales marketing and sales ops. And so then that was the kind of the role of the general manager because all the manufacturing for Creative was over in Singapore. And this was, Creative was like the first tech company in Singapore, first big one. This back in the late 80s, early 90s. And so I graduated from business school and I took a job in Miami, of all places, to run Latin America. No revenue. But they knew there was something there, so it could have been 10 million, could have been whatever. And in 3 years, we built it from zero to $150 million, and it was a ton of fun because not only was it new and entrepreneurial, we had a lot of tailwind because the Latin culture loves U.S. brands, and so it was just on fire. I mean, it was just a great time to be there. And then after 3 or 4 years doing that, I got called to do the Americas piece of it. I eventually got an offer to be this chief operating officer to a company called Lexar Media. And Lexar and SanDisk virtually owned all the IP in NAND flash at the time. And NAND flash was just starting. And small photography cards and USB thumb drives. So I was there about 3 months. And Micron, who was primarily in DRAM only, partnered and did a JV with Intel. But they needed IP to be able to defend themselves against SanDisk. So they basically had a plan to go buy Lexar in an IP, rationale business case. And the operating business was merged into a business that they had in DRAM called Crucial. And those were the two retail brands. So my first job was taking those two businesses and putting them together at Micron.
Doesn't Crucial have something online where you can kind of
the configurator. It's great.
Yeah, you Google the memory that you want, or like if you have a computer that something
you
happens.
put the brand of the computer in, then they can tell you the memory module type and what have you. Sure, it's an intelligent configurator at the time. It's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this naturally kind of folded you into the Micron.
So my first job, was exactly right. We took Lexar and the consumer NAND, and we took their DRAM, which is consumer DRAM, small business as well, and they put those two businesses together. And my first job at Micron was vice president of digital media. That took about, 2 years to get integrated well and up and running. It was a good business. It was about a $2 billion business at its peak for Micron. At a time, by the way, that, the memory business was awful. This is a little known fact. Micron cumulatively made no money in the first 30 years of its existence.
Oh, wow.
It was just such a cyclical, bumpy industry and overcapacity, undercapacity, pricing moves and whatever. We then proceeded to have a plan to find better places for our capacity because we weren't the capacity leader. And so our strategy was, let's take our precious capacity. I don't care what's going on in the market. Let's find better homes. And that was more in specialty memory and like telecommunications and and networking and high performance computing at the time. So we didn't need to go to all these consumer routes, which are easy and volume driven. But over time, we became more custom relative to our competition.
Is this because it's bigger margins? Is it just bigger
Oh yeah,
bulk?
better ASPs because there's a little work you do to get the business and the design in and the specifications, industrial.
When you say ASP, for those that are listening,
I'm sorry, that's the actual selling price.
okay.
And the memory, memory business is very cyclical. I mean, if you look at, there's times when people take production offline because they're selling below cash cost. It's one of the most cyclical industries in semis. And you can just look at the stock price movements over 20 years.
It's still consistent today, right?
Totally.
Yeah, I mean,
because what happens is inside a memory fab, everyone talks about the new latest and greatest AI, what have you, high bandwidth memory today, right? But that only consumes a small percentage, 10 or 20% of your fab. And there might be other smaller pockets. But at the end of the day, the fab efficiency is how well do you utilize your capacity? And that's driven by the consumer stuff still, even today. Cars, phones, computers, gaming systems, and that capacity, when consumer markets kind of stop or decline, that's when the chip guys get in trouble because they still have half their fab that's not optimized. And it's all about utilization. You need to use as much wafer capacity to get the economics to be in your favor. And it works sometimes, and other times it doesn't. And this bumpy ride in memory has made it quite volatile. Now, we had a strategy to go roll up the memory industry because Samsung was never really an acquirer. They invested in technology and they invested in scale, and they just built. We basically consolidated the memory business. In my 5 years there, we did 4 acquisitions of major assets. We did Toshiba in their memory business. We did Elpida. We did Mnemonics. And then we took TI's memory business all in a 10-year period.
That's incredible. I mean, because the memory ecosystem has kind of boiled down to really kind of top 3 players right now that manufacture memory. You have Samsung, you have SK Hynix, and then you have Micron, right? So
on the DRAM side, that's true. On the NAND side, it's not so true.
So with that, and your role in helping to acquire some of these companies and the such, you ultimately made it up as president over at Micron, right?
Correct.
What was that environment like? I mean, now transitioning from kind of supporting all in the memory space to saying no, let's get down to a few customers that are more high volume, better margins. How was your role over there as president?
Well, it's interesting. In my first meeting there, I looked around the table at all the officers, and I was one of them, but I was one of the newer ones. And they were very much a fab engineering culture, which makes sense because it's all about fab utilization. And so
when you say fab engineering culture, more interested in just R&D related activities?
Technology, process nodes. I mean, you had to shrink at the pace of the industry or else you're really out of business because every shrink would give you a better cost structure. And if your competitor is a generation ahead of you in terms of, when I say shrink, it's, from 70 nanometer to 42 nanometer to 35 nanometer to 28. Every time you design in lithography, it's called a shrink, a smaller footprint chip, that is better on power and better on pricing because you can put more of those chips on a wafer. So on a 12-inch wafer, think of it like a pizza. If you have smaller pieces of pepperoni, you can put more pepperoni in the pizza and still sell it for the same price or better. And so that makes the wafer more valuable. So the culture there was, how do we get to the next process node? That's what the mindset was. And expand to make sure they were getting more revenue from the wafer so they could make more money over time. That's the supply side of it. The demand side, they were basically like, let's just sell it to, this was where memory started, computers.
So this is a field of dreams. If we build it, they will come kind of scenario.
No doubt. Exactly.
Okay.
Great analogy. And so, but the interesting thing is I was a lone marketing person on this officer team. So I would say things in the meeting and they're like, whoa, I'm like, have we ever thought about breaking our customers into segments and thinking about who is the most attractive? Because we have the smallest amount of capacity versus a Samsung or a Hynix or others. What if we don't sell to the big consumer guys, and why don't we move some of that to better, more attractive homes? And that, as a team, we ended up working on that. And obviously the technology teams were great and they figured it out. Like, what could we offer? Local engineering is one. Like Samsung couldn't offer that. So we built a business that was a little bit more customer engaging on top of this commodity platform called memory. And we were number one in server. We were number one in networking. We're number one in data telecom and what have you. And so as even today, I mean, I know some of the customers that are still using DDR2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
That's a legacy that Micron built in terms of providing these new outlets for, custom memory modules.
Yeah, it's interesting because you see internal to Micron today. I mean, they have their business units that are focused in on those particular items, and then you have some of the ancillary ones where they'll put a little bit of funding into it, but it's not the revenue generating behemoths that they focus on, like you said, automotive and the such. One of those is the military aerospace area focus that they've had for I'd say more recently than anything, seeing if they can really dip their toes into this. And it's a good segue into kind of how we met, right? When the Pentagon was trying to figure out, hey, how do we make massive investments into the semiconductor space? We had the opportunity to work together on a pretty large evaluation for the Pentagon at the time, which I think helped to set the foundation for a number of items, everything from the policies that the Pentagon is implementing today, their strategies, the CHIPS initiative. It really helped to kind of do two pieces, not only show what the industry was able to provide as far as, different types of manufacturing services, et cetera, but it also gave a snapshot into, well, these are now new markets for different companies, right? Using, Micron and your time there, that's an opportunity for them. But even more so with some of the stuff that you're doing today, right?
Yeah.
It bleeds into different opportunities that the mil aerospace ecosystem may not have been, something you would have entertained in the past. So kind of starting with that, along the time when we met, there was the opportunity that presented itself with Smart Global Holdings. So kind of describe how that came about and how you, evaluated that and then ultimately took on the role.
Yeah. So without getting into a lot of detail, I had a medical issue that pulled me off the field at Micron. And, I think I was 51 at the time, 52. And, it was enough to pull me out of the corporate world for a while. I was, the reason I'm highlighting this is you start to think about life a little differently. And, I didn't know that I'd ever go back and work at that point. And it was more about what should I do? What do I want to do? And I started to get more involved in some public boards and some private boards and working with some of the private equity firms out here in Silicon Valley. As I stabilized in my health, I ran into the folks, and I know the folks pretty well from Silver Lake, and they had a collection of assets they didn't quite know what to do with. And Silver Lake was in this investment for about 8 or 9 years, and that's way beyond the horizon. Most private equity firms want to be in their investment. And so it was a very easy pitch. Hey, you know all these businesses. You know compute, you know memory, you know LED, and you've got great public company experience. Would you be interested in kind of helping kind of craft a new strategy for this company long term? And I was kind of excited because there was a mentor of mine, Steve Lusso, who's the chairman of Seagate when I'm on the board. And at the time, there was a couple bigger opportunities, and one of their competitors was looking for a CEO, and he hit me with something. He said, "I don't care what you do, do what's best for you, but I got to share something with you. You're not doing this for the money. We all know you did well in Micron and all that stuff. Build a legacy. Do something kind of high impact." And that was really kind of like, I remember I was on 101. I pulled over and I swore at him because he was right. And but I thought a lot about it, and my wife helped me. She's like, "You would be miserable going back and just redoing another Micron. That's not what you're about." And so this presented as it's almost an entrepreneurial flair inside of a small public company to go build something different. This used to be a memory module company, Smart Modular, and we've shifted the company dramatically. We'll get into that, but the intrigue for me was to have an impact, and it wasn't really. It's not about the money. I could have made more money somewhere else, but more about having the ability to really have a hands-on creation of something new for this company and the employees, team here. And it's been everything I could imagine that way. It's just been, it's different, but it's, when I look back over 5 years, what we did, it's amazing.
It's interesting, kind of the progression in life, right? First, you want to be able to have an opportunity. Then, if you're successful in that opportunity, then that's the next milestone, right? Then after that, what do you leave behind, right? And what is, like you said, your legacy? How does your not only influence into the corporate world, but your influence into people, kind of leave a lasting mark, right?
No doubt. It's kind of funny because it's if you look back, like I remember, like, dreaming about having our home and dreaming about having 3 kids and 2.5 cars and all that. And then you kind of get later on in life and you think about, what's really important. There's a guy named Arthur Brooks who's a well-known professor at Harvard, and he studies this thing on happiness. It's fascinating, and I really buy into it. But having connection to a community, having a purpose in life, being around intimacy and love, those are, whether you're making $10 an hour or $10 million an hour, those are things that are just fundamental to a purposeful life. And those are things that in the course of my being 50, 51, 55, and I've been doing a lot of thinking about, hey, and that's what kind of got me fired up about here is I can really have an impact and on people who are, kind of looking to step up and grow themselves. So it's been a really fun experience.
So why don't you describe what here is? What was Smart Global,
Sure.
and what was the intriguing part about kind of taking on the opportunity?
Yeah. At the time, the company was named Smart Global Holdings, as you've said, and implied in the holdings is it was a holding company. And coming out of memory, the memory business, as we talked earlier, is very cyclical and bumpy. So they were trying to diversify, they being the former management team in Silver Lake, were trying to diversify. So they bought a number of assets, Artisan Embedded Computing, which is the old Motorola computing. They bought Penguin. They bought a company called Enforce. They were buying Cree at the time when I was being interviewed and to come on board. So they put together this holding company framework, which is letting them all operate individually and capturing some synergies on the corporate level. But they basically set it up as a holding company. First of all, the idea of a holding company is kind of fun because the CEO gets to sit around and say, hey, what do we buy next? And what do we fix? And what do we integrate? Less of an operating role, at least on the surface. And what I found out is that's not really true because if the company doesn't have great operating discipline, the CEO has to be the operator and teach that discipline, which is great. I mean, and by the way, some pockets of the company were really good at it, some were not. I did what was called the perception study early on in my time, like 6 months into my job here. And a perception study is when you have an outside firm talk to your existing investors, shareholders, and then they're targeted by a set of criteria that makes sense that they buy small cap, technology, US-based, so on and so forth. And they came back with a recipe of recommendations / actions for the CEO. Like, hey, contemplate this as you think about adding shareholder value. And it was really very succinct and very smart. I mean, I looked at it and said, wow. I mean, then those 4 issues were, hey, a Brazilian consumer memory business, which we owned at the time, doesn't really fit the portfolio well. Secondly, you've got 80% of your business at the time in memory. That's a pretty volatile business. So you're going to always have people that kind of shy away from a memory business.
Especially on those downturns, right?
Totally, because they just don't know is there one that's going to cripple the company because the memory business has been consolidating for years. And so, yeah, they just don't know what the wherewithal of any asset in memory is going to be. So, yeah, that's a negative. Third, most of our investors didn't love the holding company model. They were in on Smart Modular, and then this diversification came. But
why is that? Why would they not like that?
Well, because the holding company model leaves the diversification of the asset to the management team. And most big investors, they diversify themselves because they can go buy individual assets and make their own holding company virtually, and in terms of what they invest in.
So the people with the money are concerned with the additional variable that someone else is going to make a decision that may decrease the value of their investment.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And the fourth thing is, in light of not loving the holding company model, why don't you look over time as a CEO to pivot to a real corporate structure with a great strategy and using the assets you have and building something? And so those 4, kind of goalposts, so to speak, were really helpful for me to think about not just shareholder value is super important, but when was the last time there was a real big holding company invented? It's a tough business if you don't have the capital and the balance sheet to go continue to acquire, which we didn't at the time. So, and the other thing is, what are you good at? That's what there's a classic book called From Good to Great, and one of the key themes there is don't be something you're not. Stick to what you're really good at and build from there. And so we kind of looked at all that in the course of our first 6 to 12 months. And at that time, it was funny. The memory operating team here was trying to make Penguin a memory model, meaning in terms of operating investments and all that stuff. And the Penguin people were saying, no, we got to invest in this thing. It's a great time because HPC is a great precursor to AI. And they were the smaller entities, so they had to kind of listen to corporate.
HPC being?
High performance computing.
Okay.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yep.
So Penguin was in high performance computing for 25 years. And early on, high performance computing was big in science, and education, and defense, and national labs, and what have you. Wasn't very good in terms of profitability.
Yeah, I mean, that I was just over at Lawrence Berkeley National Labs yesterday, and they were talking about their massive investments in HPC,
No doubt.
but mostly from an R&D perspective. Not
right.
a lot of money coming in from a revenue generation perspective at a national lab, right? That's not the intent.
And then that in turn makes it really tough to make money because people aren't looking that way. They're looking, they'll throw out government proposals and 5 people show up and they grind you down and what have you. It becomes a tough business in the prior generation. And so Penguin was, a very low margin company at the time. But the tech capabilities for learning how to build large clusters and managing large data centers and what you needed to be effective in keeping high availability, high performance computing, working and sustainable, it's really become a core competency that led us in to AI. And so this was just starting to kind of pick up some grassroots in the industry. And we had, at the end of my first year, we had an opportunity to bid on something that was just really life-changing for this company. It was a massive hyperscaler that their in-house team couldn't do it. And we were on their research side, but we never made it to their production side. Well, this was our first entree into their production side, and we built 2 large data centers, and it was a big turnaround for the company as far as opportunity. And what we learned is our unique talent in managing these data center environments. You've got cooling systems, you've got power, you've got compute, you've got storage, you've got networking, you've got memory. And then there's a software competency that we have and what's called cluster management on top of all this to make sure it all works as unified and people can understand performance levels and diagnostic and what have you. This is all a capability that we've been building over time. And all of a sudden, here's this, kind of tailwind on AI coming at us, and it presented a great opportunity for Penguin. So if I fast forward to about a year ago, as we did this growth impetus towards AI and infrastructure, we rebranded the company. And so now we're no longer Smart Global Holdings. We're a traditional corporate model called Penguin Solutions, where we deliver full infrastructure solutions to hyperscalers, enterprise, and a smaller category called NeoCloud, which are really small people in terms of companies that have assets but not business in cloud hosting. So it's the NeoCloud model is basically people like crypto players who have power, which is precious, and they have data center space, but they don't really have the know-how to implement AI. And so those 3 segments are how we look at the market, and that's where we pivoted the company over the last year, strategically telling the street that this is where we're going as a company.
Interesting. I mean, there's kind of 2 topics I want to pull on here. The first one is in that transition from the holding company now to Penguin Solutions. I've seen a number of different, pretty large announcements as it relates to, connection back into the semiconductor world, right? SK Hynix being one of the big ones. Why don't you describe that a little bit and how that relationship is now helping to accelerate your guys' growth in this direction?
So I flew by 4 years pretty quickly, but there were some moves we had to do. And so we had this Brazil business on consumer memory. We sold that. and divested of that. It was great for the company and great for the employees there because they had a parent who now is in their business. That's all they do. Good. Um, on the development side, as you said, we took in $200 million investment from SK, which is a $250 billion conglomerate in Korea. Super technology company. It's unparalleled in terms of breadth of technology they have. Today, as a matter of fact, they bypassed Samsung in terms of memory.
Oh yeah.
They are the largest and most high performing in terms of high bandwidth memory. So they've done a great job.
And it's interesting that you say the diversification, right? Because memory is one portion of the conglomerate, right?
But
They
it's
have energy, they
SK
have
Telecom.
telecom.
Yeah, that's right. So they have a broad portfolio in this holding company. They are this conglomerate. And I had a chance to meet with their chairman probably 2 years ago now. And I had helped him on another project they had in the memory space. And we kind of got to know each other and past that. He was very interested in AI. He lost track of what I was doing. And at the time, I was talking to a number of private equity firms to invest in, to get capital to go grow. Because the AI world today, it's a once in a generation opportunity. It's amazing for us in terms of how we think about what's behind us in terms of the tailwinds for growth. And it's really fascinating. You know, like this comes once in a while. The last one was obviously, .com, right? And, we learned a lot of lessons around that. But he comes in and says, hey, we're trying to get into AI in some way. And I'd love to pick your brain. I'll be in town. And I'm talking to these private equity guys to come invest into what's now Penguin Solutions. And he hears what we're doing. He's like, and the one challenge that I would say SK had is they were a technology company, kind of like Micron when I was talking about earlier, but they really weren't market savvy. So where Samsung came into the Americas and has all these consumer environment, kind of products and divisions and manufacturing, but also phones, and people know Samsung as a brand, right? And they have good lobbying in DC. SK kind of didn't invest in that early on. So SK doesn't have that infrastructure here in the States as much as you'd like.
Yep, they're absolutely learning the way that I guess the Western world kind of operates, specifically the United States, on the Hill, in the Pentagon, which is why they've stood up, SK Americas
Sure.
as a way to help with some of this education piece.
And I think, to your point, I think that learning probably just came about in the last 5 years in terms of their admission that they probably need to do more of it. And so when he heard what we were doing on infrastructure, they make a lot of investments broadly across different technology or different type of businesses, and that relative to AI. And they got really fired up. And he said, I'd love to invest. I said, well, you better hurry because I've got this process going on. And they ran faster than I could ever imagine because it was just a good match because of what they wanted, because we're the last mile to the customer in terms of integrating technology to go to customers. And it's been a great relationship. What's cool about it is they need us, but we need them. They've got some really good technology areas. They also have good geographic expansion for us in terms of other markets that we're not in today. We're a U.S. company, primarily in the U.S. For majority of our revenue. They can help us scale on a global basis. And I got to say, they've been a great partner. Amazing. And I'm not just saying that because, all partnerships don't work out great, but they've been forward-leaning, helping us think about strategy, helping us how we can work with them, how we can help them. And obviously, we still have a memory subsystem business that works with Hynix already. So there's tentacles into each other that make this really a great partnership so far.
100%. So, as you establish these kinds of partnerships, where are the bookends as it relates to Penguin's integration into the AI space? Is this something that you guys are going into known locations and, setting up capabilities, and others, just kind of invests into that? Are people setting these up and you're helping to supply the hardware? How does that work?
So we have a very unique model. A lot of people compare us to Hewlett-Packard, Dell, and Supermicro. And actually, those people are our partners of ours. We actually lead with software and solutions. and we have a service business that's integrated all into. We have a service mindset for our customers. Our business model is more like a consulting model. We don't have a technology bias. I don't have to sell one GPU versus another, one networking solution to another. What we go into as our customer is a trusted advisor. So that sounds great. Where does it show up? Well, our gross margins in our business for compute are 3 times what Supermicro and Dell are. Because we're not, the hardware follows, but without a solution, you don't need the hardware. And what happened in AI originally was a lot of people were just buying GPUs because there was like 2-year lead time, right? And they were just buying stuff without a really plan to go integrate and deploy. One of the things I was telling investors on our earnings call in 23 and 24 was, 23 and 24 are the year of GPU sales. And you got integrators selling stuff sideways just to get people, buying these things. But the deployments really didn't even start till the end of 24, 25, and 26, where these massive rollouts are all occurring. Now, the one exception was the hyperscalers have been forward leading in terms of massive data center builds, but enterprise and NeoCloud have been slower to follow for different reasons. So where we are, we get in the design side of it, and that's the design of a data center, not just the compute piece, but all of it. What's the system should look like, a hot aisle, a cold aisle, depending on the cooling environment and what the systems need. How do you manage it from a software standpoint? And there's our core platform, which is called Penguin Ice Clusterware, and third-party software, Kubernetes type stuff, or orchestration software that we build into a solution for a customer. That expertise is very unique in the industry. And so we've done that with large customers, large enterprise, and large hyperscaler we've referenced earlier, and some of our NeoCloud customers. So we're less about a hardware design, and we had this framework we say is design, build, deploy, and manage. That's our 4-step process. The design piece is, hey, Mr. Customer, what do you need? And they're like, well, what's available? Well, I'm not going to tell you. I'm like, a lot of the big OEMs are like, here's what you can buy. It's here's your list: A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's it. We go in and for the government, we've had some really new entrepreneurial stuff that chip companies that won deals at like Sandia Labs. That's public with a company called Next Silicon. We were their first deployment.
So this is almost like a consumer buying a house. You can either go and buy a house that is manufactured by a company that sells hundreds of houses, but it's all their brand, their models, their preconceived subcontractors, et cetera. Or you can hire a general contractor, and the general contractor will say, "Look, I need to know what your specific needs are, so that way I can build out the home of your dreams." So that's what you're doing in the AI space. It sounds like
there's a piece to that's true, but the other side of it is the complexity of making all these technologies integrate and work well. There's not a lot of companies that have that know-how inside their companies. Yes, the hyperscalers do because they spend every day of their life in data centers. But big vertical enterprises, hedge funds, hedge funds only have 50 people in them as it is. They don't have an infrastructure team to go out and design all this and what have you. Oil and gas, healthcare. So some of the technology companies that are more prone to having infrastructure knowledge, those aren't ideal customers for us, although we've got a couple as customers. It's more finding people who don't have the know-how and capabilities that we can actually deliver. To your point, the general contractor model or trusted advisor description is kind of more akin to how we think about how do we help you manage through all this complexity of like, what type of cooling system do you need? There's not one. No, there's a lot of different options. Networking, same thing. GPUs, NVIDIA, sure, they're a great partner. But there's other options. And what makes sense for you? Do you have the capabilities to do X, Y, Z? Can we go consider, a different architecture for you that would be better for a certain solution? So yeah, it's more custom in nature, and the know-how that we have across all these different technologies is unique for enterprise.
Okay. So one of the other interesting pieces on your background is that you sit on a number of these different high-profile boards, right? And that I believe has given you quite a bit of access into opportunities that Penguin may not have had without that kind of connection. How has that helped to influence not only some of the growth that you guys are doing here, but also just the overall strategy as a company?
Yeah, I sit on the board of Cadence Design, and I also sit on the board of Seagate. Um, Cadence is on the forefront of silicon development. And so with all their customers, and everyone uses Cadence. I mean, Cadence and Synopsys are basically a duopoly plus Mentor Graphics, which is now part of Siemens. But Cadence and Synopsys are kind of a duopoly in the best of chip design. And then they moved into system design. So on the forefront of what's going on in development of all this and AI and how that's influencing the world, you kind of see it from the beginning side of silicon. And then on the other side, there's probably not a faster growing space than storage and data. And 10 years ago, Seagate was supposed to be dead because SSDs were going to take over the world. In the past week or two, Seagate's stock performance has been record-setting. And so I see the growth and the engagement with large customers and what's going on with the data explosion. So, market access and the connection into different individuals of power of influence on what's going on in the market have really kept us smart and having broader reach than maybe a small cap company like Penguin would have normally. So the benefit is really information, knowledge, and customer access, industry access. It's been super helpful for me, and they're both obviously blue chip companies, great brands here in Silicon Valley.
Speaking of timing, we're right now at your 5-year mark, being in charge of Penguin here. Looking back at the last 5 years and let's say the next 5 years, what do you see the horizon being for the company as you continue to lead the charge here? And congratulations on 5 years. By
Thank
the
you.
way. Yeah.
Thanks very much. If you think about all of us people who are burdened with the type A personalities, we never really celebrate or look back. And you bring up 5 years, it is a milestone. And I think about what's happened. I mean, we went from a holding company to a traditional corporate environment. We used to be 80% memory. We're now less than 30. Our gross margins were 19% when I joined. It's now north of 30. We really didn't have any money. We were debt driven and borrowing, what have you. In our past Q3, we reached debt zero, which is mean we have equal cash to equal debt. So our balance sheet's the best it's ever been. And so I think about all this growth and the transformation into Penguin Solutions and the culture and the integration of teams, and it's a lot to celebrate. And when I recruited a team to complement the existing team to come in and build this together, I was looking for one really, there's a number of different values and you look at in terms of bringing on an executive, but one unique one was, are you fired up to build something? Because you can go and get a job at big companies and you be part of a team. It's all great and what have you. But there's a certain small percentage of people who are like, this impact word we used earlier, in addition to the financial and community aspect, is do you get triggered by wanting to create something? And that was a big kind of separation in my recruiting process. Like, there's a lot of great people, but is there a spark there to go build something? And so that was the common denominator in terms of bringing people into the company to help us do this transformation. And you look back and like, it's really amazing. It really is. And so I'm so proud of the team and so lucky to have such a good group with me. And as I think about the next 5 years, we've set ourselves up pretty well. We're in a great industry with a lot of tailwind. We're continuing to invest to scale our capabilities, because if you stay still, you'll be passed. But our customer engagements have grown immensely, especially in 25. So we've got a number of new customers, large-scale brand customers that are coming in, which is different than 3 or 4 years ago. So a lot of good things are happening with the company. And, AI is in the early innings of deployment. And so this is not something that's like going to be a fad, so to speak. The early stages of where we are in our life cycle. But there's light beyond AI too. There's quantum computing. And so when you think about our capabilities around high performance, complex computing environments, that's really the capabilities of the company. We're really good at it. We need to continue to invest to be a thought leader and a technology leader. But there's a great path for us to have continued success.
Yeah, it's interesting because countries are now taking a massive position as it relates to investments in this. I mean, the United States has said that this is going to be one of the major investment areas under at least this administration, right? So, like you said, tailwind on this is pretty heavy right now, and I think that it's going to continue going that because it's going to be a foundational piece that helps to accelerate all other types of industries, healthcare, banking. I mean, a variety of different areas, and we see it in our daily lives. I mean, how often are people using AI for things like cooking recipes? I mean, Chat GPT, it's something that is now almost a default for many people to go look up. Hey, I'm going to go over to Thailand. Where do I go and visit? Give me top 5 places to go. I mean, it's just integrated now in day-to-day life.
Yeah,
So
like in the background, we didn't know it. All of a sudden, it's here. It's no doubt. The other thing you didn't highlight is the geopolitical landscape beyond all this. And there's a second thing I'd call out is there's such a constraint right now in terms of availability of data center locations with appropriate power to run these data centers, that the big hyperscaler guys, they're going outside the country now. India, the Middle East, large deployments. And so that in the backdrop of what's going to happen geopolitically with who has access to chips and all that stuff. And so countries, sovereign cloud, sovereign AI models are happening so companies don't get left behind or are restricted in terms of how they build out AI. So it's a fascinating market. And we see continued growth out in the future. And I think, as I said, I think it's early on. I think there's just so much, and then we haven't even started to talk about, this is mostly training, but there's a second wave called inferencing, which has not even really started. I mean, yes, there's a lot of technology being developed, but it hasn't even started.
describe that a little bit. What do you mean by training and inferencing?
Okay, so training is the complexity that makes the AI engine work. And meaning what I mean by that is simulations of what AI can know as truth is done through algorithms. So if you see a picture of a cat, and then you see another picture of a cat, and you see another picture of a cat, the more pictures you can get, the more accurate you can get of, a cat is a cat.
So this is like the machine learning portion.
Correct.
Okay.
Of AI. The interesting part is how you use AI to make decisions in your business. You were just talking about a consumer application about going somewhere and knowing the top 5 restaurants or what have you. But there's also this inferencing, which is if I get presented with a data, what do I have to do? What is the intelligence telling me I should do in a decision? So it could be a pricing decision. It could be where do I drill for oil, what have you. You teach the AI engine, here are the criteria that are coming in for a decision. Knowing this, what would you infer me to do? And that's called inferencing. And that's normally done out closer. It's normally done at the edge. It doesn't have to be, but the idea is that putting this capability to use AI to make decisions or to run a certain environment, that's done closer where business is transacted or in a more distributed way in terms of a infrastructure design.
So one of the questions that typically comes up is how much human involvement is going to be around if that inferencing is going to be there. I mean, you can't completely eliminate a human out of the loop, but how much do you think there's going to be the AI portion that is making many of these decisions, everything from health decisions, corporate decisions, whatever it may be? How do you see that kind of balancing act between the technology opportunities and the amount that a person is still able to, determine which direction or what decision and the such?
It's funny. I just had this conversation this weekend. One was in terms of the legal industry, and one was in terms of financial analysts. It's a pretty dramatic impact. I'm not going to say that it's, yes, you're right. There's always going to be room for human involvement. But it was funny. People were saying AI will replace a large need of what paralegals do today. And I listened to there's someone at a big law firm here in Silicon Valley tell me the rationale, and it made a total sense. I mean, and again, given these large language models that do all this training, they're talking about 250, 300 billion parameters that they're testing for accuracy on. It's pretty good. I mean, it works. And so, whether it's that or a financial analyst who's told, hey, go get all this information on XYZ company and come in and present this to me about, where we should invest our money, what have you. Well, you can do it on, and what's happening now with the training models is there's now someone takes the big one, then customizes it to a vertical. And so there's there might be a financial analyst vertical for ChatGPT. And so there's all these different models out there by vertical that, it's going to have a huge impact, I'd say, on analytical skills that you no longer really need. I shouldn't say no longer, but you don't need as much.
Yeah, but it also eliminates a lot of the mistakes that a person makes, right? You go to a financial analyst and they only have in their head what they've learned. And I mean, I'd love to believe my financial analyst is spending nights and weekends thinking about my stuff and accumulating as much information. But that only happens on an AI model where
they don't have 250 billion parameters going on in their head.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think it's going to be an inflection point with just humans as a whole, because I think it's going to make a lot of positions obsolete for day-to-day work, and there's going to be a big outcry of, hey, you can't get rid of these kinds of things. But I think it's going to provide an evolution for people to say, okay, hey, well, now this position doesn't exist, or these sets of positions don't exist. So what else is there? And I think it's going to just create this big separation of people that are going to focus in on next set of opportunities that are in either technical spaces, healthcare spaces, whatever it may be, or people in the trades, because you can't really have someone with a good AI algorithm dig a hole or do masonry work or whatever it may be. Those are things that are core to human life, right? So I think it's going to be a split, and it's going to cut out some of those things that were good at the time, but now there's better ways to do it. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so. And the analogy I might use is back in the late 80s, early 90s, there was kind of a separation between manufacturing and services. And of course, the U.S. let manufacturing go, kind of, at least in certain industries. We talked about becoming a service economy. And I think with AI, to your point, there has to be an evolution on what's next for labor in general.
I do want to circle back to one final item, which I believe is a big passion project of yours. And I'll let you go ahead and tell the story, but you got a phone call to go help out just kind of out of the blue, tapping into your college days of football-related items to help the community here locally. Why don't you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, it was totally random. I have always had a passion to help kids. I grew up in a single parent environment, and it's just something that kind of, if I can help a kid who needs help, that's kind of a cool reward for me and have an impact on a situation. I was involved in Little League and all that stuff. Last summer, I was in Italy with 3 other families on vacation. I got a call at 3 o'clock in the morning. And the local high school football coach had lost their 4 best players. They all transferred out in May. And so he started to look for another job, didn't tell anybody, and he quit. And 3 weeks before the season was supposed to start. And so I got a call from the athletic director saying, hey, and my kids went to a different high school. So she asked me, she says, would you be interested in being the head coach at Los Altos, which is the town I live in? And that's a hybrid of Los Altos kids and Mountain View, 2 totally different demographics, by the way. My first reaction is, are you crazy? I've never coached high school football before. And it's different, my wife and I are watching Friday Night Lights and we're like, this is not exactly Los Altos. But I just told her, I said, look, you're stuck. Come back and tell me you can't find anybody. I mean, I'll try to help out where I can, but I don't think I'm the best candidate. And she said, no, we're having a meeting Monday night. We're going to either pull the plug on the season or we need a coach.
Oh, it was that?
Sure, because it was 3 weeks before the season was to start. And if they don't have anyone to show up, the kids are, rudderless, so to speak. So, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so you decided,
Yeah, I had to go to the board, obviously, because that was a big commitment. And it was funny because the board told me that, please do it.
Oh, really?
Because your leadership team needs you out of their hair, and they need to be growing themselves, and it'll put some balance in your life and what have you. And so,
Mark, go get a hobby. We need you to have a hobby right now.
So They were very supportive, and it was a super rewarding experience. Super, like as I said, I through a lot of reflection over the last decade about legacy and what you want to do. Um, I get pretty motivated by helping people who don't have an opportunity or need some help in an opportunity. And this was great because these are kids, or a majority of the kids come from homes that don't have great economics or single parent environment, what have you. And to be able to have an impact, not on the game of football, which is great, that's fun, but more just in life. Get them graduating from high school, get them thinking about things, and so you can be an influence through this platform. And we had a great team of coaches I was able to put together in like weeks, but a lot of people stepped up. I recently raised a bunch of money this year because the program didn't have any money, and the kids need new socks and new shoes and stuff like that. And it's just been a labor of love for me just to be around kids who care. And our numbers are great. We've doubled the number of kids in the program in 12 months, which that's a good indicator that kids are at least enjoying the experience.
And they're excited. They're telling their friends about it and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right. So anyways, it's been a great hobby and a great passion of mine, and a game I love. It's fun. It's a great, football is interesting because it's the ultimate team sport. It's not an individual sport. You have to have 11 people on each side of the ball coming together. And my daughters were in the theater, same thing. In a play, you need everyone to be cohesively involved or it doesn't work. So I think it's also a great game for life.
Oh, yeah.
There's only one football, but there's 11 positions. So you have to kind of all pitch in to do something wonderful together. And so, yeah, it's been great.
You learn a lot about yourself, camaraderie, what work ethic is. I mean, it's a transformational period in a kid's life. I mean,
was for me, yeah, for sure.
100% for me as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you realize that you make good decisions, you eat good stuff, you train hard, you will probably perform well, when it's time.
And it's at a point in life where kids are just starting to get away from the dependency on mom and dad and starting to test themselves a little bit. So to your point about the influence you just mentioned, they're creating an identity for themselves of who they want to be. And yeah, football could be a vehicle. There's a lot of other good vehicles, but there's something around discipline, hard work, accountability, just those little values in life that carry forward throughout your life. You start to build back in high school.
You going to do it again this next year?
Run.
Awesome, man. Well, Mark, hey, this was great. Thanks a bunch for joining us here on the podcast. And looking forward to, like I said, the next 5 years, seeing how, you shape the company, continue to grow it, how the football team ends up doing, and just staying connected, man. It's always good chatting with you.
Yeah, great to talk to you, and thanks for coming in.
Bye now.
Thanks.